Okay, welcome everyone to the Grove City Division of Police virtual town hall meeting. My name is Lieutenant Jason Stern, and tonight I will serve as the moderator for the meeting. Before I turn the microphone over to the chief, I have a couple points I want to cover. First, this is a virtual town hall meeting, so the dynamics of raising your hand and asking a question will be different than in person. Please be patient with us as we work to get all your questions answered. If you have a question while the chief is talking, use the icon on your screen to raise your hand. I will open your mic so you can ask the question. After you ask your question, use the same icon to lower your hand. You may also use the Q&A function to submit a question, and I will try to get to you as best as I can. Second, try to keep your questions as concise as possible. If we run out of time and your question was not answered, email me directly at jstern@grovecityohio.gov. Third, please remember to be respectful. There may be children listening, so use family-appropriate language with your questions and comments. If we get disconnected, I will get back into the system and attempt to open the meeting again. Just follow your email prompts to log back in. Okay. Let me introduce the chief before I turn everything over to him. Chief Rick Butsko began his law enforcement career with the City of Grove City Division of Police in September 1992, after graduating from the Ohio State Highway Patrol Academy. Chief Butsko worked in the department's Patrol Bureau, Youth Services Bureau, as a school resource officer, Detective Bureau, was also the sergeant for the Special Operations Bureau, and was the commander of the Field Services Bureau. In July 2018, Rick Butsko was appointed to the position of Chief of Police. He has a Bachelor of Science in Public Safety Management and Leadership from Franklin University and has a master's degree in Public Administration from Tiffin University. Chief Butsko also graduated from the FBI National Academy. Prior to law enforcement, he served 4 years of active duty U.S. Marine Corps, including service in Operation Desert Storm. Chief Butsko is married to his wife, Melissa, of 20 years, and they live in Grove City with 2 of their 5 children still living at home. Chief, it's all yours.
Thank you for that introduction, and thank you for joining me tonight for my first virtual town hall. And I wanted to hold this meeting really for 2 reasons. The first is I want to give all citizens access to their chief of police. We are at a time when policing across America is being considered in many different aspects, and you having the ability to communicate directly with your local law enforcement officials is very important, and I wanted to give this virtual town hall as an opportunity for you to do that. And the second is, during many conversations that I have with groups or with people or with friends, I realize that there is a lot of misunderstanding and that people really don't understand law enforcement operations. And hopefully, by the end of our discussion, at least we'll open some dialogue and I'll be able to fill in some of those blanks and talk about some of the issues that are pressing locally and even across our nation. During this time or hour that we have together here, I really want this to be conversational. I want to give you an opportunity to speak to me. I want to give you the opportunity to ask questions. And I do have some prepared thoughts and some prepared notes that I'm going to begin with. I also have your questions, and I will be working through those. But if the conversation takes a turn because there is something that is important that has been brought up, let's please take that detour and make this very valuable for understanding more about Grove City and police work in general. So the first couple of thoughts that I want to begin with the foundation of modern policing. So the foundation of modern policing really came about in 1829 with a man named Sir Robert Peel, and he was the chief of the Metropolitan Police Department in London. And he came up with 9 principles, and the principles were so well founded They are very relevant today. And there is one principle that should be at the forefront of the conversations that we should be having in law enforcement. And that concept, and one of the 9 principles of Peel's policing, is that the public are the police and the police are the public. The point with this is that our narrative has become an us versus them. It has become the police and whatever group folks are having problems with. And that's not the right discussion. That's not the right model. And we need to get back to communities. And I lead the Grove City Division of Police with the philosophy that we are in this together. The police officers are those that are trained and are hired to give the full-time attention to law and order in our community, but that we are all a part of this. So if you think about the criminal justice system as a whole, it begins with the citizens electing officials to represent them. That would be the legislators, the judges, the mayors and leaders. They pass the laws that make us believe or take us to a point where we are ordering our society the way that we want it to be. The police department, police officers are given the responsibility of enforcing those laws. And then upon enforcing those laws, they are taken before the judiciary, where the reasonableness and totality of whatever is happening in that situation is evaluated. Then the situation repeats. The police ideally should be operating as a disinterested third party in all of this. And with some of your questions, I'm going to come back to this point, so I'm not going to go too far with that. But essentially, the police don't make the laws. The police don't choose which laws. The citizens do through their representatives in city council or into the House of Representatives or the Senate as we get into the state and national level. The police are then tasked with enforcing those, and without a particular bias one way or another, and because the police are operating as an extension of what society is asking for. So if we lay that as the premise of what should be happening, and what I believe we are doing a pretty good job of in Grove City, hopefully it'll bring some clarity as to different areas where this relationship is breaking down. The next point that I want to get into before I get into your questions is the idea of labeling. Right now, there is a lot of discussions of the police. And on the nationwide stage, especially, there are over 800,000 police officers in the United States. There are 18,000 plus police departments, and we are all different and unique. So as soon as we start a discussion with the police, we have got to be very specific as to what we are talking about. Which police department, which state, and just as there are companies that are in the same business, but they are very different. And let's take the example of retailers just in our own town. Certainly Target is different than Walmart, that is different than Kohl's, that is different than Meijer, and so forth and so on. They are similar in a way, but very different. Certainly they are not in collusion as to how they are operating. And I can tell you that police departments and police officers don't agree on all issues, not even by a long shot. So it's very important that we be careful with the labeling. Let me take this a little bit further. So if you were to start putting labels on me, I am a white male, so there's one label. I am a police officer, put that label on me. I am a Grove City resident, there's another label. I'm a father and a husband. There's 2 more labels. I was in the Marine Corps, so you can put the label of Marine on me. I'm college educated, so you can put that label on me. I like to cycle, so now I'm a cyclist. I like to go to movies, so now I'm a moviegoer. And for the sake of going on and on and on, hopefully you can see that there are labels that we all have that could go on for quite a long, excuse me. And to try to take one or two of those labels to identify any of us is a gross misuse of stereotyping. There are those labels that I shared with you, and some of them are more meaningful to me than to others. There's some that really define my personality and my character and my experience more than others, but that's unique to each one of us. I can tell you an experience like going into the Marine Corps affects so many former Marines very differently. And to say that because I have that label, that it automatically equates to a certain type of disposition or a certain personality trait isn't fair. And what I would ask you is when we put the label on somebody of police, that you're very careful to not lose track that officers are very unique and very different. There are white officers, there are black officers, there are female officers, there are gay officers, there are officers who are Democrats, there are officers who are Republican, there are officers who are old and officers who are young. The truth of it is, like in any workplace, a lot of police officers don't agree with one another and we don't get along and we're not necessarily friends just because we work together. So as we talk about the specifics, the labels cheapen the conversation. It distracts in a way, and there's going to be far more meaningful talk if we're careful with those stereotypes. I wanted to make those 2 points. I hope that that gives you part of the foundation of how I'm looking at some of these matters, how I am trying to lead this police department and be helpful in our community. And with that, let me get into the questions that you have sent. The
Hey,
first,
Chief, can I jump in here real quick?
sure.
Charles has a question. He says, as a member of the General Assembly, what would you like them to do to help? Sorry. As a member of the Ohio Senate, what would you like to see from the General Assembly?
So the General Assembly has a tremendous responsibility right now because there's a lot of momentum going into police reform. And I have spoken to our local representatives personally to share this message. And this is what I would share with everyone here, even those who are not directly involved. And that is, as we begin to implement laws or undo laws or other aspects that change policing in Ohio, that we make sure that we're looking at these very carefully, that we're proceeding with urgency on those that are urgent, but that we're looking at these with a very responsible and careful approach. What I am alarmed about and what I would bring to everyone's mind is the way that these issues have been politicized, and the trouble with that is that when very complicated matters in police work, such as de-escalation techniques, are simplified and then hasty legislation is passed, things can get worse. And I would be glad to go in that a little bit further if that would make sense. So to answer the question, there needs to be careful consideration as we proceed. All is not lost in this country. All is not lost in our state. All is not lost in Grove City. We don't need to scrap everything. I disagree with that notion. And I could go on quite a bit giving you examples of why there are some good activities in American policing and that there are a lot of police officers doing good work. Are there some areas that really need to be improved? Certainly. Do we have an approach and an attitude to continuously improve what we are doing? And then to be responsible to the citizens, because we serve the citizens. The best police departments and the best attitudes in policing are not self-serving. In other words, the police don't serve themselves. We come to work and we come into this profession to serve the needs of the citizens. So what is important is that we carefully think these through, and that the citizens are getting the services that they expect from the police department, or the restraint of services that they don't want from the police. So any, without me droning on with that, any feedback, or do you want to open up his microphone, Lieutenant, so we can dialogue on that?
Stand by, Chief. I don't know if, Charles, if you have the equipment to use your microphone, raise your hand, or let us know. I'll see if I can turn your microphone on so you can talk. All right, Charles, your microphone's on if you have one.
Yeah. So basically, I was going to give my email address to the chief to further this dialogue. I live in Grove City, and I'm not the senator that I work for. He's not in this district, but this is also a big thing for him, as to figure out where we can make the connect as far as what we can do as the GA to help law enforcement and get over this. What's the word I want to use? We get what you guys are saying. We get the frustration you guys are going through. We get that. And just where we can meet as a, basically as a dialogue to, what do you guys want from the GA, and what can we do to help you?
Thank you for that comment, Charles. I can tell you what we want from our legislators is responsible movement from here. There are a lot of crazy ideas. Let me tell you one crazy idea, and that is to do away with the police altogether. And you don't have to look too far to hear people that are calling about disbanding and doing away with the police. That is not a responsible model. I'm speaking very, very broadly here.
Yeah.
Because there are a lot of discussions, from de-escalation training requirements to reporting requirements to use of force requirements. So this is a very broad question. And I think that my answer that covers that question, that the citizens as well as the police need to be involved in that discussion. So let me expand on this a little bit. I've noticed that there, in different pockets of the country, there are citizen groups or politicians. So when I'm using that word citizens, I mean those who are not in law enforcement, that are trying to design or reinvent or direct law enforcement in a very technical sense. These initiatives are, for the most part, well-intended. But let me use this analogy. If I were to tell you that I went to medical school and I studied how to be a doctor, medical doctor, and I went through college and learned all about doing operations, but I've never been in the operating room once, I hope that you would not trust me to operate on you or your loved ones.
Fair.
There is a very, very big difference between understanding legalities, law, or legislation, or even studying criminal justice and having a degree in that, and having experience to be able to really understand what police work is like and how this goes. And my concern is that there are those that do not have the experience in our profession, and they're making decisions, and some of the consequences are not going to be good.
Okay. Which, I mean, you make a great point. So if you could name the top 3 things that are the top 3 things that would be hindering the police department right now, based mainly Grove City at this point, or just in general for the state of Ohio, what would they be?
With those questions, I want to be very careful to stay within Grove City. My expertise is in Grove City.
Okay.
My responsibilities as the chief of police are in Grove City, and this is where I can speak with authority on what is happening in our community, in our town, in this division.
Okay.
The challenges that we have. So let me back up a bit and talk about the excellence of our division, the excellence of our city. We are doing outstanding police work. I am very proud of the work of this division, the men and women in this division, the way that they conduct themselves, their professionalism. And I will say this, that after the incident in Minneapolis with George Floyd, we looked at our operations, because anytime a startling incident like that happens, you want to consider what does that mean to us? But it didn't change a lot, and let me tell you why. And it has nothing to do with whether that incident was important or not. It was very important for America and very important for American policing. But the reason that it didn't change us in Grove City very much is that we were against that type of police work before that happened. We were 100% committed to racial equality, bias-free policing, and treating all persons with respect before I ever heard the name of George Floyd. So I'm sharing that with you because what report you're not going to hear from me tonight is the major overhaul of the Grove City Division. I'm not going to tell you about the initiatives that we are now engaging on that are really going to change law enforcement in Grove City, because we believed in these ideals, and many other departments have as well. We believed in the ideals of professional, fair policing well before the year 2020. So the biggest challenges that we have, I will tell you, coming back to what is happening on the larger stage, is Ohio, the Ohio laws will affect us the greatest. And what I'm concerned about is the broad sweeping laws that can happen in Ohio that won't add value to Grove City, won't change what is happening here, but may be very difficult for us to comply with for particular reasons, or may actually take us backwards. And those are our challenges. Those are my concerns. I am staying very close with the legislation as much as we can. Let me tell you, there are so many bills being introduced and discussed that that is a full-time job. The Ohio Associations of Chiefs of Police and the Franklin County Chiefs Association are two professional groups that we are staying very connected with what's happening locally and in the region to try to be a part of making Grove City, Franklin County, and the state of Ohio better because of the opportunities and legislation that we have. There's a lot of chance, guys, that this will not get better if the wrong laws are passed, if the wrong initiatives are implemented, and we have a lot to lose. I will say that, and I would be glad to expand on those comments if somebody would like to. Or we can move on with the questions that we have and get into some other issues.
Well, Chief, Brian has a question for you here, so I'm going to try to unmute his mic here.
Okay. Hello, Brian.
Yeah. Am I getting through?
We can hear you, Brian. Go ahead.
Okay, great. So this may balance right into what you were just talking about, Chief. Appreciate your point around medical doctors and operating rooms, but balance that or take that back then to your earlier comments, and I won't get exactly right, but the idea that the public, the police, and the police are the public, and we as the community have a responsibility to articulate the services we want. And I think the words were restrain the services we don't, or something to that point. So how do we engage with understanding what those laws are and what those bills are rather, and where we should be advocating and where we shouldn't?
That was a pretty big question. So let me.
It was, yeah, it expanded.
Thank you for that. So backing up to, I'm gonna break your question up into two parts if I understand what you just asked. The first is, how do the citizens, how do we engage with what services you want from the police and what services you do not? That really begins with your political leaders. So think of the police as a contractor, for lack of a better word. Think of the police as a disinterested third party. Let me use a very crude and clumsy analogy. Let's say that you hired a contractor to come over to your house and give you an estimate on things that were broken. And as they went around and gave you estimates as to what was broken, you then would just pick and choose which services you want and which services you're going to forego. Now, where does that happen? That aspect happens when laws are passed or when laws are rescinded. In essence, once a law is passed, it is the duty of the officers to enforce that law. And in theory, your city council members, your legislators are acting on your behalf, are speaking on your behalf. And when they speak and when they vote, we agree with rule of law and the social contract where the laws are passed and all citizens must comply with the laws, and those that don't, the police are left to deal with. The important point that I think is missed in some of the conversations that I have, and that's where my thoughts on this come from, is that the police have a specific interest in enforcing different types of laws. And let me tell you what the best police have an interest in, and that is doing a good job enforcing the laws that we are tasked to enforce. It comes from, in Grove City, our city council. So, for example, we have some laws that have to do with minor public nuisances. And one of those, and I've got a question in my stack here, have to do with basketball hoops in the roadway. This is a very minor and almost silly point that I'm bringing up. We certainly have bigger things to talk about than basketball hoops in the driveway. But I can tell you that this will kind of prove my point of the police have a job to do, and we have no interest one way or another in this. The citizens have contacted city council and the mayor's office and said that they don't like basketball hoops in the roadway. It causes problems with kids in the roads and whatever the case may be. And the city council works on passing legislation, and the laws are passed, and that falls under the police to enforce. I'm not going to tell you my personal opinions on basketball hoops in the roadway, but I can assure you that there's no police officer that got into this profession to get into enforcing that type of law. Nevertheless, it's what we're asked to do, and we're required to do that. So take that into any law that we have, and a discussion that all citizens should be having regularly. The government is here to serve you. All aspects of the government should be serving the citizens. There are some communities that want lesser government, they want lesser laws, they want less involvement, and they vote that way, and they make sure that their legislators and their political leaders are doing just that for them. There are others that want just the opposite. They want more regulation, they want more laws, they want the police to be involved, because eventually any law that gets into criminal conduct ends with the police taking enforcement. And if that is not what the citizen wants, that is a discussion for the politicians and the citizens to have, along with the judges who make determinations on these. And I don't mean to take this into a civics lesson, but just when I watch reports and news and listen to people's opinions, it's lost that the police are one segment in a broad process of government services. And I think that if we're going to be criticizing the services of government, the police, the criminal justice system being a part of that, that we don't lose sight of the complexity and the chain of events of how these things happen. I got to tell you, there's quite a few police officers and police chiefs that would be just fine with a lot of these criminal laws coming off the books so that we wouldn't have to deal with them. I can assure you of that. But that's not our role. Our role is not to pick and choose which laws to enforce and which laws we're not going to enforce. It's our role to follow our mandate of enforcing all of the laws that are existing in our jurisdiction and doing the best that we can to serve the citizens in that regard.
Hey, Chief, I have a question here from Bob. I'm going to unmute his mic here. Stand by. Okay, go ahead, Bob.
Hi, Chief. I'm inquiring about a 2016 shooting that I saw on the internet, along with an officer assaulted a female employee, causing facial injury and eye injury in the dispatch room at makeohiogreat.com. And I was wanting to see if that is true, or if it's a fabricated story, or if there's any incident reporting that in Grove City.
Okay, let me repeat that question. I wasn't tracking you very closely. There is a report that there was a shooting where one of our female employers was injured. If that's the question, the answer is that is false. That is not a true report.
So the video that we see at Make Ohio Great, the Grove City Police Department.
I'm not sure what video you're referring to. The question was there a female?
At the website makeohiogreat.com, it appears there's an officer shooting a gun. It says a live stimulator, and it shows an officer covering the camera after shooting. And I was wondering what that video is about and why, if that was released to the public.
I'm not familiar with that website. I don't want to speculate when I'm not sure what you're referring to. We have not had a female employee shot.
No. I'm sorry. The website appears showing two separate incidents. One, there was an officer shooting, and another, there's an officer that assaulted a female employee in the dispatch room, causing facial injury. And her name is, it appears, Tasha Rutain. And it appears that her mother-in-law is Lori Rutain, who is the secretary for Lieutenant Lawless. And it appears that Lieutenant Lawless was transferred to the City of Gahanna Chief of Police. And like they're the person that filed a complaint in the City of Gahanna on misconduct that is related to Grove City misconducts. I was wondering if the shooting at that simulator video is from Grove City, and if an officer assaulted a female in the dispatch room in 2016 that caused facial injury.
Okay, I think I understand what you're saying, and we're going to move quickly on to this so we can get into a lot of the questions that we have. For the audience here, we had an accidental discharge in a training room, and there is a video of that. So I believe that's what he's talking about with a Grove City officer that happened several years ago. And the second is we had an incident with our canine with one of our female employees where the canine jumped up while she was bending down and hit her in the mouth and caused some minor injury. So if that's what you're talking about, those are the incidents. Okay.
Hey, Chief, we've got actually a couple of requests for you to go through the questions that were submitted ahead of time.
Okay.
I'm talking about the ones that came through the emails, the ones that you have in front of you. A couple of different people just want you to go through. But
Yes, yep, let's continue on. I will, the next question that I have is in regards to what is the experience of a police officer when they are stopping someone in a motor vehicle? So if a police officer is in a cruiser and is going to stop someone for speeding, in a very common situation, in the way that our radar systems work, is that a car will be approaching the cruiser. Let's say they're speeding at 50 miles an hour on Broadway, for example, and then the officer is doing 30, 35 miles an hour. So a combined closing speed of 80 to 85 miles an hour. When the police officer determines he's going to stop that person, it is very regular. It is very, very common that the officer does not know who is in that car, doesn't know the race of the person in the car, how many people are in the car, whether it's male or female, until the officer stops that car. That is almost exclusively true at night in low lighting conditions. It's true with vehicles that have limited visibility because of window tint or when it's raining. And it is not unheard of that we find out who is in that car when we walk up and greet them. So that conversation or that point came up, and there's a question that I have here regarding police officers targeting certain types of people. And the truth of it is, are there officers that do that sometime? And are there racist police officers across our country? And the answer is certainly yes. Does that happen in Grove City? The answer is no. If it did, I want you to know from your chief of police that we would not tolerate that. And absolutely, we would be taking efforts to make sure that people are not being biased or profiled based on some demographic or gender identity. It is very challenging for officers when they are dealing with all of the complexities of stopping a motorist to understand who is in that car. So I wanted to share that with you because I think that there is a misunderstanding that officers know who is in that car when they're stopping them. So that is an important point. There is another question that I had regarding opiates. And part of the priorities that we have for treating the opiate addictions. And I want to tell you that it is the philosophy of this division of police and the city to be very committed to doing everything that we can to treat opiate addictions. I want to give you an example of the complexity of this problem. We have a Special Operations Bureau, and the Special Operations Bureau focuses on drug enforcement. We have a regular exercise in our retail shopping areas where we focus on shoplifting crimes because there is a nexus between shoplifting and opiate addiction. Folks who are addicted to opiates, heroin, pills, will use shoplifting as the means to support the financial side of purchasing the drugs. So our officers in that unit set up a joint operation with loss prevention and also Adam H. drug counselors. And during an 8-hour exercise, we arrested shoplifters, and 12 of them were identified as being linked to heroin addiction, opiate addictions. The way that this exercise worked was that once they were arrested, they were given a summons for shoplifting. Immediately after, they were released from police custody with the instructions and the opportunity to speak to a drug counselor from Adam H. The Adam H counselors were prepared to take them immediately into treatment facilities. Out of the 12 that we stopped, 10 of them did not want to talk to the counselors at all. 2 of them agreed to talk to the counselors, but none of them agreed to go to treatment. The biggest problem that we are seeing in law enforcement, especially in Franklin County, is not an absence of services, not an absence of drug enforcement on the dealer side of this, not anything other than the very people who are using these drugs are rejecting the opportunities for treatment. So I had a question on that. What is our plan to deal with this? I'm very proud of the fact that our division was early adopters of Narcan. We proceed with urgency to deploy Narcan. Our Narcan use has been troublingly high. Not that I'm concerned about using the Narcan, but that tells me there's a lot of people that are still struggling with heroin addiction. We are committed to do what we can on our end to help with this terrible problem. I wish that there was an easy answer, but just with the example that I share with our retail shopping blitz, the problem is very, very complicated and is beyond just a simple solution of offering more treatment. Okay, on to the next question, unless there was some feedback or some thoughts on that issue. The next question that I have is in regards to body cameras. And the question is regarding our implementation of body cameras. So for those of you who aren't aware, the Grove City Division does not currently deploy body cameras. We do have in-cruiser video cameras. In 2021 budget cycle, we are planning on implementing these. We are moving forward with that. We are at the stage where we are getting specific quotes for the hardware and the software necessary for that. And we are on track as of today to have these deployed in the field and active in 2021. The state legislation did a fantastic job in protecting the privacy of the citizens with officers who are wearing those body cams. And that was a lot of concern with the deployment of those before those restrictions were in place. So we are in a good way to offer those great services without compromising the privacy of people that need our help. Next question has to do with animal leash laws, and seniors cannot walk on the sidewalk because of dogs running it loose. And the next is basketball hoops need to be removed and need to remain on private property. We have laws that are in place for both of those. We are glad to help where those are a problem. And please contact the division and let us know how we can help with that. Okay. The next question is, I would like to hear more about anti-racist policies, procedures, training employed by the Division of Police, with a follow-up to how is Grove City Division of Police proactively training officers to counter such biases. So I've talked about this a little earlier when I was talking about our view of community policing, our core value of respect, and our sense of racial and gender equality well before the recent turn of events. So what we are doing is continuing what we have been doing all along. So once a year, our officers are required to attend our bias-based profiling training, and we do that annually. And then across the city, this is not just for police officers, but all city employees are required to attend our implicit bias training. And for those reasons, along with our personal beliefs, we are operating at a very very firm anti-racist anti-bias type of culture. We have recently hired, and we're very glad to have very talented minority employees, and that is an important aspect of our operation. And our employee percentages represent a fair reflection of the racial makeup of our community. That is a very big topic. I will pause for a moment to see if we want to get into that a little bit more.
Yes, Chief. Amanda sent in a question. She said she does not have a microphone. So I'm going to read her question for you.
Okay.
It says, I'm not able to speak, but data from GCPD appears to show approximately 18% of arrests are blacks, while only about 3% of GC is black. Do you see this as racial injustice? Are you concerned with systemic racial bias in Grove City? What are solutions?
Okay. So for the sake of everybody on this discussion, what that question was based on, or the data, was on our 2019 citizen contact data collection and analysis. So I have that report here, and I will look at these data points and share my interpretation and my response to the question. So this report shows from a point of arrests. Let me get to this point. From point of arrests, we arrested 1,800 white males, 1,072 white females, 414 black males, 217 black females. So clearly you can see from the data that the majority, by far, 1,800 white males were arrested. Now, the question had to do with this does not reflect our citizens. If you would look all the way to the left of the chart, I know that most of you don't have this, but for those that do, on the left of this chart, you will see that the activity for non-residents was significant. In other words, we have a lot of people traveling into Grove City to commit crimes. I can tell you this with certainty. We do not look at the appearance of anyone when we are taking enforcement actions. We do not consider their race. We do not consider their gender. We don't consider any orientation or ethnicity. What we do look at is their conduct. We look at their behavior. And if they are breaking the law, we're going to take enforcement on that. The officers in Grove City hold respect for all persons in the highest of esteem. The fact that we have this report and collect this data and then are willing to present it and talk about it, I hope is evidence to you how serious and how important this is to us. We are continuously looking at the use of force of officers. We investigate every single one carefully. We look at the arrests that are made yearly. We look at the arrests of officers across each shift to see if there is anything that's getting out of line. This is important to us today. It has been important to us in the past, and it will continue to be important to us that everyone is represented fairly and equally. Nobody is above the law and nobody is beneath the law, regardless of any type of identity that they may have. If there's any more on that, I'd be glad to take. Lieutenant?
Yep, we got another couple questions coming through, and if I'm going to condense it down into one. Can you talk a little bit about, you mentioned it with some of our police hires over the last 10 years. Can you mention a little bit about our demographics internally here and our staff?
So yes, So if you were to go on to our city website and go into the Division of Police, you would find our annual report. And in our annual report has quite a few data points that may be interesting to you if you want some more data on the police. And what I am reading from right now is our 2019 annual report. And we have 64 police officers. So of our police officers, 5% are African American, 1% is Hispanic, 92 are white. So in females, we do not have any minority female officers, although we do have 6 officers, and that is a pretty good percentage of representation of our diversity with equal employment for women employees as well.
All right, and one more follow-up question, Chief, from Amanda. So back up one step to the question before. She says, to follow up, are you concerned with systemic bias in Grove City?
I don't believe that any of the employees or officers in the Grove City Division of Police behave in racist ways. I don't know what is in the mind of every employee. What I do know is our commitment in my position that we will police and engage in a bias-free environment. If I catch indications that any employee, whether it be an officer on the street dealing with the public, an employee inside of our division dealing with other employees, is behaving in any way that is other than bias-free, free of any sort of harassment, I will absolutely take the appropriate measures to correct and direct and deal with that behavior. So, do I have concerns that that is going on? I do not. Do I think it is important to continually pay attention to that, to continue to look after that, and to make sure that I'm not wrong? And the answer is yes. It is very important for us to make sure that our policing is professional, that the conduct of our officers is exemplary, and that all of our employees are working in a harassment-free employment situation. Excuse me.
All right.
Anything further on that?
I think we've wrapped that one up. Hold on here. I had a few comments come in here real quick. So let's do this, and we'll do this a 2-part question. I'm going to combine 2 different questions. Is Grove City PD concerned about officers' family safety as informations are leaked online about personal information? And then kind of on the same similar flavor, can you talk a little bit about our drop in application numbers over the last 3 years? And if you need a lifeline on that, I've got the numbers for you.
Okay. The first question is very troubling and personal for me regarding the safety of the men and women of the Division of Police. And to answer your question, yes, I am very concerned. The men and women, the officers in this division are tremendous people. They are wonderful, sacrificial servants who go up and beyond to serve this community and to serve the citizens. I could tell you story after story of what these men and women do to help people, the citizens of our town, or the travelers that end up here. And I'm not going to do that for the sake of time and so that we can continue to work through the issues that are very, very pressing. Here's what I would say. Being a police officer is a job that we do. We are fathers, we are mothers, We are brothers and sisters and sons. Some of us are grandparents, and that we come to work and we try to give our best, and we go home to families just like the majority of you in this text today. And I want you to imagine that you are going to a job where you're trying to help, you're trying to make things better, but there are people that hate you just because of the job that you're trying to do without knowing you. They are willing to hurt you, and it seems to be very, very fashionable right now to yell things like kill the police and all cops are bastards. That is deplorable. It is very troublesome to me. I am really bothered about what that means about the fabric of our society. And I'll stop right there with that question. What was the second part, please?
I've got several actually that came in. The second part was, can you take a minute and talk about our diminishing recruiting numbers over the last couple of years? And a follow-up to your last question, what steps are being taken to protect and support the police staff here at Grove City? So recruitment and keeping police officers safe. And then I've got some others.
Lieutenant, you are in charge of our recruiting and our hiring efforts. It seems very irresponsible of me to answer that question when you were here and you would be better. So please take it away. I'm going to step away just for one moment.
Okay, Chief. So when I was hired almost 17 years ago, there were over 400 people that took the test for the position that I got. 3 years ago, and I don't have the exact numbers, I could look them up if you're interested later, but 3 years ago, we had somewhere in the neighborhood of 200 people take the test. 2 years ago, we had 150. Last year, we had about 130, 150. And this year, for a recent recruitment cycle, we had a total of, I want to say it was like 63 people apply and get invited to the PT test. So our applicant pool has been shrinking over the last handful of years. As far as what steps we are taking to keep our officers safe, obviously we're blessed here in Grove City. We are able to get our officers to great training. We have a very robust internal training mechanism. And then we send our officers outside to different types of trainings. We also talk internally about just ways to keep ourselves safe coming and going from work. We make sure that we back each other up, when we need to, and when there's maybe extra danger or at nighttime, things can be unknown. So I'm going to keep trying to scroll through some of your questions here. Alyssa, you had a question about an incident with Officer White. Do you have a microphone that I can open up for you? Let me try here. I'm gonna try to open up Alyssa's microphone. Did it work? Are you there, Alyssa?
Hear me? Perfect. I'd seen on social media a video, I think with Officer White, where you'd been called responding to needing to remove someone from a location, and the officer repeated a statement that the person said similar to something about, I'm going to choose not to shoot you today, something to that effect. Chief, would you've handled that situation differently? And I wondered what any outcome was with the officer as far as just discussing that and reflecting on it and how that might have been handled differently in the future.
Yes, I'd be glad to talk with you about that. And that video has circulated. So I'm glad that if some of you have seen that you're giving me a chance to respond. I want to set the stage for what happened. But let me back up just a moment and talk about this officer. So this officer is a very considerate, compassionate person. He is a true civil servant. And with the intimacy of our organization, I know the majority of the officers very well. I know them personally. If you were in trouble and you wanted an officer to come help you with that problem, Officer White would be tremendous, and you would be glad to have him. He is not a a bully, hard-headed top police officer in any way. And so I just want to give you the impression of him as an individual and the quality of person that he is. The scenario went like this. A woman was in the LabCorp for a pre-employment drug screen. There was some sort of dispute, and the clerk of the LabCorp or the manager, and I'm not real sure who made this decision, she was causing such a disturbance, the woman in the video, that they called for the police to escort this woman out. When the officer got there, Officer White, he saw the disturbance going on. It was continuing, where the woman who was being escorted was very aggressively speaking, and she was so bombastic, it was very alarming to everyone around, including the target of this conversation. You can imagine, if you've seen situations like that, what that felt to that person. Officer White talked to the woman that needed to leave, the trespasser, for lack of a better word, and convinced her to walk out the door, to which she turned her patronizing and her criticizing towards Officer White. She said, "Don't you dare touch me. I am a black woman and you are a white officer and you're allowed to touch me." And the conversation wasn't going there in any way. It had nothing to do with the race of anyone. It had to do with the fact that she was causing a disturbance in this doctor's office. And they called for our services to have her removed. And quite frankly, I will tell you, just so that there's no doubt in anybody's mind, there's no police officer that enjoys going on that type of call for service. This is the opposite of having a fun day at work. While the officer was walking her out, she is exclaiming to him, "Please don't shoot me," in a very patronizing way. There was absolutely no discussion or any legitimate reason for her to think that she was going to be shot. They were walking out to her car, as simple as this gets. It was his job to escort her off the property. And she said this several more times. And finally, she turned to him and said, "Would you consider not shooting me?" To which he echoed that back, not in a patronizing way, but as a frustrated person trying to do his job. "Yes, I will consider not shooting you." And in his mind, he was saying what she was saying in a sense that would satisfy her, and she would get in her car and she would leave. She pulls out her cell phone and, playing a gotcha game with the officer, says, "So you would consider not shooting me?" Which he said, "Yes, I will consider not shooting you," echoing back what she had said. She got into her car and she left. She did not file any complaints with the division. She went to social media and, with an inflammatory type video taken way out of context, attempted to smear the officer and to smear the division of police, because she knew what really happened. And that video was characterized in a way that made it look like it was something that it was not. I did speak with the officer. The officer is a person just like you are, and he was a little disappointed by the fact that he is trying to do his job and did nothing wrong other than echo back to what she said, and here is his integrity as a hardworking police officer is under attack. Is it the best thing to say, echo back when someone says something obnoxious to you? And the answer is no. Would it have been better for him to not respond in that way? And he and I agreed that the answer to that is yes. Officer White took a lot away from that, and as did other officers. But quite frankly, this is a gotcha game where people are trying to trick and to trip up officers and accuse us of being something that we were not. And that situation is disappointing to me, but it illustrates the challenges of policing. And I think a question should also be included with that is, what is the responsibility of that woman to treat everybody with respect, including the people of those in LabCorp and the officers that come that are trying to do a difficult job, that don't want to be there any more than anybody else. And the totality of those situations need to be included.
Okay, Chief, got two more for you here. They're different. So I'm just going to treat this as kind of a follow-up to that last question. Talk about how difficult it is, or is it difficult for officers to report other officers wrongdoing, and talk about what the procedure is for that. And then we have a question from Charles about how much of a crime is from outside of non-Grove City residents.
So I heard the first part of your question. I did not hear the second. So let me answer the first part. The officers reporting misconduct on other officers is very challenging. I can tell you the Grove City Division of Police officers have done this regularly, and it is a very unpleasant experience. I am very proud of the integrity of the officers. I'm very proud that we run our division with professionalism, and the culture of accountability is nothing new to Grove City, and I'm very satisfied that our officers are conducting themselves in the highest levels of professionalism in that area, and have written up complaints on one another. Most recently, there was, to give you an example of why I say that, there was an officer that is no longer with us, and his employment was separated. And the last straw, and this happened just a couple of months ago, the last straw that led to his separation had to do with one officer reporting his misconduct to his supervisor. So that is not a regular thing that happens, but there are enough examples of that happening that I do believe that our policies and our practice in that area are being observed in the field as well as within our policies, that we're doing what we're saying we're doing, and we're following through with that. What was the second question, please?
The second question was about how much of our crime is from people that are coming in to our city from outside of Grove City. And then I have another one after that.
Okay. I don't know specifically beyond what I shared with the amount of activity, but I can tell you anecdotally that we have quite a few. It's a very high number of our crimes are committed by residents other than living in Grove City. So with the activity that I shared from the citizen contact data collection and analysis, I'll repeat that statistic that may get us closer to that answer. We arrest about 110 to 150 people a month. And the activity level, which is enforcement, but also other contacts for non-residents, is very, very high at 2,327. So it appears that our total contacts, and this does not include arrests or enforcement, with non-residents are higher than Grove City residents, because the Grove City residents sit at 1,300, non-residents at 2,300. It's not completely conclusive, but it'll give you an idea of the profile of the work the officers are seeing in the field.
Okay. Let's see here. We got one more here. How can the department help the larger community, Columbus view that Grove City is not a safe or pleasant place for people of color? That is the reputation. I have a hard time reading it. That is the reputation. How do we do better to attract more diverse resident population?
Well, let me take exception to that opinion. Let me give you an example of that. So I live in Meadow Grove, and across the street from me is a family that I am pretty good friends with. We're friends to the point where I've been over to their house for their kids' birthday parties. They bring over their dishes to share when they put together something delicious, and they are from Pakistan. And when I was talking with them, as I was getting to know them, we got into their feelings of Grove City and how they got here from Pakistan. So when I say from Pakistan, they have immigrated here from Pakistan to here, first generation. And what they reported to me and what their experience has been, including with me and other neighbors and their time in Grove City, is that this is a wonderful town to live in. That they actually work in a town that I won't mention because I don't want to embarrass or accuse somebody of something that may not be fair. But they work in a different town, and they weren't so sure they would be accepted there. And they came to Grove City because they felt differently. They felt that this was a place that they could live and call home. And so far, the years that they've been here, about 2 or 3, they are thrilled. They enjoy having me as a neighbor. We've become friends. And there are more reports like that. That's not an isolated incident. So I don't think you're going to get me to agree that Grove City is not a community that accepts diversity. The second question is what can we do to increase diversity? And I certainly wouldn't want to speak too much on that issue because it's outside of my area of expertise. I can tell you that from a division of police standpoint, we respect all persons, regardless of your race or preferences or ethnicity, and that they will absolutely get equal representation if they come here to Grove City. And you can, I will stand behind that and carefully look into any exceptions or complaints against that very thing. Very, very important to us.
All right, Chief, I have a couple more for you, and then I think you've got some other questions that were submitted ahead. People have asked about a couple of those questions as well. Has the department taken any financial hits with COVID, and will it in the future?
So financially, the Division of Police is well funded. The last time that I spoke to the finance director, the full impact of COVID was not yet realized. I can tell you that across the city, we are being very, very cautious and responsible to make sure that we are anticipating changes in revenues. But right now, I can tell you the Division of Police is funded. There will be no loss of services that we are concerned about right now because of funding. So all is well here thus far.
Okay, Chief, we had one. It was a follow-up to the recruitment question. I'll go ahead and answer. The question is to let the attendees know what they can do in attracting top-level police talent. And we are always looking for good people to do this job. We want high character people doing this job. So if you know somebody that's interested, is motivated, have them send their application in. They can always sign on to the website and then be notified of employment opportunities as they come along. We usually have a recruiting cycle every year. And then again, we had a couple of questions about some of the other questions that were submitted ahead of time. So I'll check that off, Chief.
Yeah, so I have a list of questions I will continue through. I will, okay, we'll worry about the time. I was looking at the clock to be respectful of people's times. Let me continue on with the questions and we'll see where this takes us. So I had several questions regarding Black Lives Matter. One is, do you stand with Black Lives Matter movement against racist police tactics? I'm going to read all of these and then I'll speak on Black Lives Matter. Where does GCPD stand regarding Black Lives Matter? The next was, do you believe that Black Lives Matter? What steps is Division of Police taking to ensure that Black people and all people of color feel safe in Grove City? And you get the general essence of the question. So let me answer this question about Black Lives Matter. And I want to segregate this, so I carefully answer this so there's no confusion to where I stand and why I think this way. Do I stand with or support the organization of Black Lives Matter? And the answer to that is no, I do not. I do not for two reasons. The first is they are an anti-police organization that engages in rhetoric that I can't stand and I can't tolerate, regardless of what their issues are. The fact that they happen to be currently promoting an issue that I think has merit, and that is racial equality, does not justify or remedy the other infractions, the anti-police, kill the police rhetoric that does nothing but inflame and brings no solution. The next is the leaders of that organization are openly Marxist. And most recently in a New York Post article, one of the main founders, let's see if I have her name here, Cullors is his name, Patricia Cullors, is quoted as being trained in Marxism and having Marxist ideologies. I don't think like that. I don't support Marxist ideologies. I believe in the freedoms that America offers. And for those two reasons, I do not stand with nor do I support the organization of Black Lives Matter. The second and more important question is, am I against racist police tactics? And the answer is absolutely yes, I'm against that. It is a disgrace to the badge. It tarnishes the good work of the hundreds of thousands of police officers across this country when there are officers who engage in racist tactics or in police work that results in the terrible situation like with George Floyd. I am against that, and I will tell you that the majority of police officers by far, that's not even a fair statement when I say the majority. It should be the far majority. Completely against that. We believe in the Constitution. We believe in you talk to police officers, that is what you will hear. Position that everyone deserves freedom in this country. Everybody deserves equality under government services, including the police. Certainly can support that and get behind that. And that has my continual support. And like I said earlier, even before the situation in Minneapolis, and it will continue on beyond these days, regardless. I was born, and it wasn't my choice to be white. It wasn't my choice to be born in America. I can't take credit for those things. And on the same token, I don't criticize people who were born different than I am. What is fair to evaluate people by is what they do, how they conduct themselves, how they behave. And that is where that stands.
Hey, Chief, Melanie had a follow-up question on that. I'm going to read it how she's written it here. Outside of the Black Lives Matter organization, do you believe that Black life matters?
Certainly, I believe that everybody, regardless of their race, socioeconomic class, ethnicity, and so forth and so on, the sanctity of life is one of the highest ideals of our country. I personally subscribe to that. This division runs with that mindset that the sanctity of life is the biggest reason that we are here. And let me tell you, there have never been a finer group of men and women who will put their own lives and their own necks on the line to save others who are in peril. And that is not unique to our division, although I'm very, very proud of the men and women in this division. Let me share a story with you. So we were called up to Columbus several months ago to help with their rioters and looting. While all the Grove City officers were there helping on an outskirt post, a car pulled into the scene of two Grove City officers, one male and one female, and the guy inside had been shot. He had a gunshot wound to the chest. And when the officers went over to help, the victim of this gunshot wound was a black man. The officers grabbed their med kit and immediately applied first aid, including a chest seal so that he could continue breathing, while the crowd yelled and heckled and threw things at them. So the officers were putting themselves at risk to save this man's life, and I am very proud to tell you that the story ends well. The officers were not injured. The man lived, and the medics who transported him said it was probably due to the life-saving efforts of those two officers with that black gunshot victim. Do we believe that lives matter regardless of race? That is an understatement. We live with that as our ethos. That is our purpose. And I won't go on and on with the stories to prove that to you. I can emphatically agree with that statement.
Okay, sir, I think we're caught up. Just back to the questions that were submitted in advance. Thank you.
Okay, the next two questions have to do with traffic, and this will get us to the end of your submitted questions. One is as far as traffic enforcement. The question is, Grove City Division of Police, are they able to run radar in a private business like John's Auto Service without permission of the owner, Kathy? So we work in cooperation with our citizens always. When it comes to matters like this, if we are working traffic on private property and that property owner doesn't want us on their property, we will leave. So to answer the question, would we come on to your business and work traffic if you asked us not to? And the answer is no, we would not. If you asked us to leave. Speaking of traffic enforcement, and as the chief, the messages that I get are that the vast majority of our citizens, it is 95+%, want us to enforce traffic. They want more traffic enforcement. They want attention on their street. They want attention on the streets that they travel or their children play on. And very rarely, and I can't tell you the last time I received written communication, although I have at times, people have complained that we're working traffic in an area and it's inconveniencing them. But that's very minor compared to the requests. So I'm going to say probably 95% of our citizens want more traffic enforcement, and that's what we respond to. The next has to do with traffic enforcement on Holton Road. Between Hoover and Meadow Grove, this section of the roadway is not in the city limits, and we do not work traffic there unless there is an exigent circumstance that requires an immediate response, but the normal traffic, that would belong to the sheriff's office. The school there, another question that I have, Buckeye Woods School is in the city limits, so the officers do respond and handle criminal issues there. But the next question has to do with bicycle riders. Bicycle riders are required to follow all traffic laws as motor vehicles do. And then the last has to do with speed limit signs on Holton Road between Hoover and Meadow Grove. And honestly, I don't recall what signs are there or whose responsibility that section of the roadway would be. If it was in the sheriff's office, it would be with the Franklin County engineers, but I don't know the specifics of that without looking further into it as to what signs are there and who is responsible for it, depending on which side of the roadway, or I'm sorry, which section of the roadway we're talking about. As we get into the area of Jackson Middle School on Holt Road, that is in the city limits. So that would be under the responsibility of Grove City to post those speeding signs, speed limit signs. All right, folks, I have gotten through. Well, there is another question. I got, there's one more on my thoughts. So the question was, what are my thoughts on the protests and riots occurring in many communities across the U.S.? I'm going to limit my comments to the citizens that live in those areas. So I hope that we all believe in rule of law, that nobody is above the law and nobody is beneath it. We all must abide by it. Even if you're real mad, you still have to abide by the law. Crimes are broken up into 3 different categories. Let me explain this so that I can make my next point. Those 3 categories are crimes against society, crimes against property, and crimes against persons. If you've ever heard an officer speaking to somebody, or maybe in television or a documentary, and the officer is asking someone if they want to press charges, that would be in regards to crimes against property or persons. In other words, the police don't have any interest or any standing in this. We are the professionals who have the expertise to help citizens file criminal charges on their behalf. I am of the opinion that every citizen in this country should be able to make that choice for themselves. If you have established a business or a home, I do not support the police allowing other people to come destroy it. I think that every person needs to make that choice for themselves. If someone is willing to sacrifice their own property or their own material goods for the sake to satisfy rioters and looters, and that's their decision to make. I don't think the government should be imposing that decision on citizens for a political agenda. I think that getting back to the government serves the people, not the popular opinion, but every person as an individual. And I do not agree that the government officials should allow, even if it is a popular movement, other people, other citizens to come destroy their property and cause damage or to injure them even worse. So my thoughts on the protests and riots is that we are seeing a denigration of rule of law. And this is problematic for these situations for sure, especially if you live there or if your business or if your livelihood was decimated because of that. But I think that this is taking us down a road of chaos and lawlessness that is going to be well beyond what we've seen here if we don't agree as a society in America that rule of law matters and that everybody must follow it. All right, Lieutenant, any further questions, or has anybody have anything more for me before we sign off tonight?
I think I'm caught up. Hold on. Okay, we did just get one here asking about disability awareness training that was submitted on behalf of Deaf Advocate Brian Weaver.
What's the question?
It says, any comment on disability awareness training? I think the question is, do we do disability awareness training here? What type of training do we offer? I think that's the question.
The most recent disability awareness training we did was with a recognized Central Ohio deaf advocacy group called D-Wave. And they have partnered with law enforcement with providing training and placards for law enforcement dealing with the hearing impaired. We did that about 9 months ago. It was very good training. That's the first thing that comes to mind with that. All right. It is my pleasure to serve in this community, to live in this community, to raise my family in this community, and to talk with you tonight. I want you to feel as though this police department is yours. In other words, this is your hometown. We are here to serve you. We operate with full transparency. I would be glad to share with you any records or policies or to discuss incidents with you that you are interested in or that bring you concern. And I want you to know that we are here to serve you, to make Grove City the best hometown. And I'm looking forward to further dialogues that take us in that direction. Thank you for spending your Sunday evening with me, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you soon. Chief Butsko, over now.